Talk with Mountain Man and the Wiz.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Toke Talk After Dark. Tonight we'll be reading I Kill Evil That the Government Does Not Want You to Know About. Memoirs of an Army Ranger, Part 1, The Giants of Afghanistan. This story was sourced from No Sleep on Reddit. Enjoy. I have seen and killed real evil. I'm not talking about people. Well, I've killed plenty of them too. But no man compares to real evil. No man is capable of the same atrocities and chaos that real evil inflicts. I hunted giants during my first deployment to Afghanistan, and they are the epitome of evil. I'm a U.S. Army Ranger. I've been serving in BAT for 12 years, and I've seen and killed the scariest shit imaginable. I haven't told anyone for fear of what would happen to my family and me. I lay awake most nights, wishing I could tell my wife what I've encountered. My mind and soul breaking from the weight I've carried. I relive the horrors every night when I go to sleep. I've kept it all to myself until I found no sleep. I've recognized many stories posted by brothers in Spec Ops and military communities, and realized I finally had an outlet. I've checked in on some of the posters to confirm they're still breathing. I guess the government assumes that no sleep is fake, so they don't monitor it. What I'm about to share with you is real. You deserve to know what lies in the shadows. You deserve to know what they're hiding from you. And you deserve to know about the men and women that have sacrificed their lives to keep the forces of evil at bay. Skip the next few paragraphs if you are knowledgeable of the Spec Ops community. It's important that you have a basic understanding before you get to all the crazy shit. I promise you the story that follows will be well worth it. Army Rangers are Tier 2 Spec Ops units. Along with the Green Berets, SEALs, Marine Force Recon, and MARSOC. Tier 1 consists of CAG, Delta Force, and DevGRU, SEAL Team 6, and numerous groups that I won't even speak about. There's a value in being unknown in the world. We're often joined by Tier 1 groups from around the world, which are usually the SAS, Brits, Aussies, and Kiwis, and Joint Task Force 2 Canadians. Tier 2 consists of the top 0.1% of the military. Tier 1 generally only recruits from the best of Tier 2. We all train for years, selection, qualification, schools. We all possess top security clearances or higher. We're all very good at killing, and we will all forfeit our freedom, our lives, and possibly those of our families if we share what we've done. Our governments utilize Spec Ops units because we work in secret. We're the best. We're all well funded, and we can deploy anywhere in the world without congressional approval, declaration of war. You'd be shocked by how many countries and which countries that we're currently serving in. Our track record is impeccable, but usually closed to the public. I'm 34, a major, and I've been serving in BAT, which is a Ranger Battalion, for the past 12 years. I'm from Kansas City and a Missouri grad. I'm currently attending a military school at Fort Leavenworth while I work on my PhD from Kansas State, and await my next deployment to some hellhole. The good news is that I have plenty of time to share with my experiences before I head back out. My first encounter with real evil happened during my first deployment to Afghanistan. It was 2009. I remember checking the computer to Kuwait while awaiting a C-130 to take me to Bagram, a air base in Afghanistan. I was excited. The Chiefs had just signed Matt Castle, thinking we'd be heading to the Super Bowl soon. Anything to get my mind off of what awaited me. Death. Paralysis. Loss of limbs. I was 24, just a year out of college, and didn't have a serious girlfriend. I had a lot to live for. I pushed it out of my mind, leaning on the fact that I'd be leading the baddest motherfuckers on the planet. My Rangers would get it done, and I'd make my Bat and Rangers proud. I flew into Bagram at 2200 with a couple dozen other soldiers wearing our bulletproof vests and Kevlar helmets. The C-130 was dark, only the dim green light illuminating the inside. Those around me glowed like alien green. The pilot gave us a warning to strap in as he began his descent, circling over the airfield and shooting flares to ensure no RPGs could hit us on the way down. Some fobbit whimpered and cried in the corner, while an NCO making eye contact with me yelled at the soldier to stop being a bitch as he rolled his eyes with a small grin. The ramps lowered, slamming hard onto the cement runway with a loud metallic crack. I grabbed my gear and headed out into the dark. A huge staff sergeant yelled,
"Lieutenant, get your shit and follow me."
Sergeant Vasquez, 6'5" and built like a brick shithouse. Shaved head, looking like a Hispanic version of The Rock. He led me to the hooch at the Spec Ops gated community on base. It was a storage container, which had 3 sleeping quarters divided by plywood. He told me to throw my gear on and head to the Tactical Operations Center. The commander had a mission for me. I stood in the TOC in full gear, M4 hanging from my sling and Glock in my leg holster, looking at the dozens of TV screens and soldiers monitoring radios. The room was full of chatter. Too much chatter. Something big was going on. My commander, Lieutenant Colonel LTC Williams, introduced himself, telling me I was the big league now. Shut the fuck up and do exactly what Captain Stone said. He then ushered me into a side room. I looked around and realized this wasn't going to be a normal mission. Sergeant Vasquez sat at the table with 8 others, their sleeves bare and no Ranger scrolls. I realized it was an 8-man team of berets called ODA. My commander started his brief.
Team 329 went missing approximately 4 hours ago in a distant portion of the Alisay Mountains. Their last transmission came in broken. They were escorting a CIA operative to a cave high in the mountains. We haven't been told anything else. We're sending in Team 357 for search and rescue. LT, you and Vasquez are tagging along. Your platoon is on mission for another few days, so you're going to get some experience, learning from Captain Stone and his team.
The S2 and intel officer stepped in and provided us much detail as he could for the mission, while my commander pulled me out of the room.
"Lieutenant, we don't know what the fuck is going on. The CIA are being shitbags as usual. They've left the teams and us in the dark. I want you and Vasquez to gather as much intel as possible while you're there. These fuckers are getting our guys killed, and we don't know what for."
I met Captain Stone and his team at their vehicles, 3 Humvees that had been stripped down. They basically looked like dune buggies with miniguns strapped to the top. Captain Stone looked me in the eyes. He had a steely resolve, but there was worry behind his eyes. He raised his hand above his head, said,
LT, aim high.
I responded, "Roger, sir. Headshots," gathering that he had meant enemy had body armor on. He looked at me again, fiercely serious, fully extended his arm above his head.
No, aim high.
I nodded and we all loaded into the vehicles. Is he saying they'll hit us from the top of the cave? I remember thinking. I pushed it from my mind as we took off. We left Bagram still pitch black, wearing NVGs, and rode through the hot desert night. I was consistently scanning the perimeter, waiting to be ambushed on the roads. I looked back at the huge bearded team guys. They were all looking straight ahead. They all seemed to know something that I didn't. They had zero concern for the road and seemed to be a million miles away in their minds. It was as if the real threat far exceeded what we'd seen from the Hajis en route. We hit the Alisay Mountains a couple hours later, pulling into a small combat outpost and dismounting.
Ammo, grenades, water, NVGs.
Is all Captain Stone said. I grabbed my assault pack as one of the team guys tossed me a few grenades and an extra mag. We stepped off the COP, moving up the mountain in wedge formation. I remember thinking we were invincible as we looked at these huge warriors carrying M4s, SCARs, M2 sniper rifles, 203 grenade launchers. These guys had probably taken down entire Al-Qaeda units by themselves. They had the look, the one you earn from taking the lives of other men. I felt like I was a superhuman. Little did I know what awaited us. We came upon a cave just as the sun was cresting the mountain. The sky was blood red as the darkness faded into oblivion. The cave looked like the mouth of a giant serpent. The opening was on the other side of a sheer ledge that stood 10 to 15 feet high. As we approached, Captain Stone said,
Eyes up. Keep your distance.
As we got within 100 meters of the cave, I saw something shiny on the ground. I signaled for the squad to halt and called Captain Stone over. It was a radio. The mic had been ripped off the radio. Had a massive dent. Dried, black blood caked the side of it. Chunks of skin and tissue littered the area. Captain Stone said,
Shit, James.
As his face turned to anger. He stood up as one of the team guys pulled out some climbing gear. He fastened it, and we all climbed the rope as silent as we could. I was the last to climb, cresting the ledge, seeing the squad in prone, pointing their weapons at the cave opening. As soon as I was up, the squad stood and started to move slowly towards the cave. E, one of the team guys, took point and took a few steps towards the cave. I was overcome with the worst smell imaginable, like sulfur, shit, and rotten milk. I began to get intense feelings of despair and hopelessness. It wasn't the adrenaline rush and heightened sense of normal engagement I felt. It felt evil. Just as E put his hand up to motion us to stop, I heard the deepest, loudest roar emanate from the cave. It sounded like a cross between a man yelling and a roar of a lion, but blended in an impossible manner. Before we knew it, something huge came charging out of the cave, impaled E with a massive spear, lifting him 15 feet off of the ground. I looked in amazement as what looked like a huge man. It was absolutely massive, standing 13, 14 feet tall, its shoulders as wide as I am tall. It had long red hair, a shaggy red beard. It had a loincloth on and leather sacks on its feet. We were all momentarily frozen. There was an absolute sense of pure, unbridled evil that emanated from this thing. And finally, Captain Stone yelled,
Headshots!
We all unleashed a array of rounds into the beast's face. 9 soldiers, all emptying 2 to 3 mags worth of ammo into the beast. It dropped E, who was still skewered on the spear, and began to charge at me, the ground shaking with every step. It looked at me with such cruelty and disdain, open mouth revealing 2 rows of giant teeth. I felt like an ant that was about to be stomped on by a child. It yelled something in another language that I didn't understand, its voice splitting my eardrums. As I reached out, its massive hand grabbed me. It finally fell, riddled with bullets. Its head and face caved in. Captain Stone emptied another magazine of 7.62 into the giant's head before going to check on E's body. It took 3 of us to lift the spear and another 2 to pull E's body off of it, which made a sucking noise as we did. The spear had ripped out the entire cavity of his chest. His ribs were splintered and sticking straight out like crooked, jagged teeth. All of his internal organs laid in a pile on the desert floor. The 5 of us covered in his warm, sticky blood. Captain Jones called the sitrep and requested transport. We all sat down for what seemed like an eternity of silence. Normally, after a mission, we joke around and tell the most inappropriate stories. It's tradition and makes the horror of war feel a little more acceptable. Today was different. Every eye was glazed over. Everyone sat, facing away from the giant. We had seen, felt real evil. This thing was not a man. Being in the presence brought on a feeling of hopelessness that I can't begin to describe. It was like all joy, hope, and good had been sucked out of the world, replaced by despair and agony. We finally stood up and examined the beast. It had 6 fingers on each hand. Its hands were large enough to wrap around my torso. Its mouth revealed 2 rows of teeth, with each tooth being the length of my finger. The hair on its head and beard was an unnatural shade of red. I wrapped my hands around one of its fingers and attempted to lift its arm. I couldn't even get its hand off the ground. The spear still dripping with blood. Weighed as much as the logs we used in training. To require 6 men to lift above our heads. As we stepped into the cave, we saw hundreds of human bones and chunks of skin and tissue and military uniforms littered in piles. In the corner were hundreds of weapons, modern guns like M4s and FALs, rusted out AK-47s, ancient rotten swords, spears, shields. It's like it was keeping trophies. An unmarked Chinook showed up 15 minutes later. A bunch of spooks, CIA ops, walked out. One said,
"Grab the Neff."
The team sergeant yelled,
Fucking clowns. Thanks for the intel.
The sergeant never made eye contact. They unloaded a forklift and cargo net, wrapping up the beast and loading him into the Chinook. Captain Stone motioned for me to come over. I asked if he was doing his closure report, a brief officer have to fill out to summarize battles. He said,
"No. Wait for it."
Shortly after, one of the agents walked over and pulled out a piece of paper. It was a pre-filled closure report, detailed how we had been ambushed by Al-Qaeda. E had been killed before we scared them off. He said,
"Sign it."
Captain Stone signed and motioned for me to do the same. With a threatening look, the agent said,
"You can never speak of this."
He turned to walk away, and I asked, "What's a Neff?" He paused momentarily and then walked off. When we returned to Bagram, we did a full debrief. Some spooks sat us down in the corner the entire time to ensure we didn't speak about the giant. After the brief, my commander told me to shower and meet him at the smoke pit in 20 minutes.
Ditch your electronics.
LTC Williams handed me a cigar as I approached the smoke pit. He asked me what I had actually seen on the mission and then explained to me that the 6 other teams had encountered these giants. Most were less lucky than we were. He informed me that he was trying to figure out what the hell they were, and he did eventually. But that was a story for another day. My first engagement with the giants set off a chain of events that brought me to the truth of those evil beings, and many others. After the mission was over, I was approached by one of these team guys. He removed his hat to reveal a kippa underneath.
"Sir, do you want to know what that thing said to you when it charged?"
He asked. I nodded without hesitation.
"It said, 'Son of Yeshua, I will eat your soul.'"
He then looked at me in the eye and said,
"We've killed dozens of these things. We're figuring out what they are, and it's not good. Head out with us on the mission tomorrow, and I'll fill you in." Hey guys, thank you for listening to another episode of Toke Talk After Dark and the narration of I Kill Evil That the Government Doesn't Want You to Know About. Memoirs of an Army Ranger, Part 1. The Giants of Afghanistan. Story sourced from No Sleep Reddit. You guys have a wonderful night, and remember, keep your tinfoil hats and your bowls close. You never know what may happen.
"Peace, y'all."